6:32 p.m. This is the Independent City Council Budget Committee meeting taking place Wednesday, May 26, 2021. We will start with a call to order, please. Did that go through?
Yes.
Karen, do you want to do the call to order?
Oh, do the roll
Sorry, the
call?
roll call. A roll
Okay.
call. I'm sorry. Boom,
Okay.
boom, I'm knocking. Call to order done.
Thank you. Mayor McArdle,
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Nathan Christensen,
Here.
Councillor Core, Nancy Lodge,
Here.
Councillor Morton,
Here.
Dory Scholl,
Here.
Councillor Jobe,
Here.
Bill Boisvert,
Here.
Councillor Takis,
Here.
Jessica Porter,
Here.
Councillor Roden,
Here.
Aaron Seiler,
Here.
and Councillor Martin Willis.
Kathy, say here.
You're still muted, Kathy. Kathy, you're still muted.
Okay, I keep hitting my unmute button there. Do we have me now?
Yes.
Here, present by video. Yes, Councillor Martin Willis.
And then Miranda Garrison is absent.
Sorry, you're muted.
There we go. Okay. At this point, I'm going to ask Councillor Core to make a brief statement.
I put it in the chat. Hearing from some people the other day, could either Tom, Gloria, the mayor, Dory, somebody let people who may be listening into this know what the objective of the budget committee is and how budget committee members can interact in this process, whether it's making a motion or comments, and how does all that get tied together and result in a product at the end of this?
Excellent. Thank you. I would like, if possible, Mr. Pessamir to answer that.
Sure, yeah, so thanks, Counselor. So actually we're at item 3, which is review the agenda. So I think maybe I'll just try to do both at the same time. Review the agenda also is, for the budget committee to, make any adjustments if they want. But, really what we were doing at last week's meeting and what we will continue to be doing at this meeting, at least for the first portion of it, is to really present the budget and then allow the budget committee to ask questions. And so this is really kind of really a lot of what we did at last week's meeting was really just to present, give you the opportunity to review the budget, ask your questions, and then answer those questions as much as we could. And we'll, as we go through the agenda tonight, there are some themes that we picked out that we'll probably answer right at the beginning of the reviewing of the questions when we get to item number 5. And also to open up to the public for questions. So obviously this is an interactive process and we invite the public into the meeting, so they will have an opportunity at the beginning of the meeting as well. We'll kind of transition through that into really going through the questions that were submitted and making sure that everybody has great information. We're not going to do really much on department summaries tonight. Our department managers are here if you have questions, but really their budgets are really similar to the previous year or so. And we're going to actually at some council meetings have department managers do some presenting here in the near future. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on department summaries. But if you have questions there and individual departments you want to ask, we have people here to answer those questions. And then, once we get to item 9 on the agenda, that's really when things shift from the presenting and asking questions to really more of the budget committee to then start focusing on, what discussion do they want to have amongst the members and what do you guys want to talk about individually is members of the budget committee, which is ultimately then going to lead right into some of the action items, the hearings that have come up in item number 10, and then the act hopefully tonight. But if not, we have time next week to actually take action and approve the budget. We also have urban renewal that we need to deal with as well, so that'll be a separate process when we get to that, just to make sure that we do that. But essentially, that's it. I mean, the goal of the budget committee is to listen, to understand, ask questions, make sure that information is given, and then ultimately, hopefully, adopt the budget, which would then go to council for actual approval at a future council meeting. So does that answer your question? Nathan, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm not sure at what point to do this, but probably better earlier rather than later. But I just wanted to get it on record that my wife is an employee of the city. She works at the Independence Heritage Museum. So during any museum discussions, I'm gonna stay quiet. That's it, really.
Yeah, and just one other thing I'll mention, Nathan, thanks for bringing that up. I also know that that we are working on a concert series. Yes, the summer concert series is it's in the budget, and we plan to actually do something much scaled down. And one of the people who is competing for that contract is Jessica's husband. So that would fall under the potential conflict of interest, because actually we haven't even made a decision on that. And even if we had, there really isn't anything there. But Jessica, would you want to note for the record that there's a potential conflict of interest for that item?
Yes, thanks, Tom. My husband is under consideration for a potential contract position with the city.
Yeah, and we're super excited about getting that summer concert series up and running. So I'm glad that we have some people who are interested in helping us put that on this year. So.
Council Morton has her hand raised.
Thank you. I also wanted to disclose that for nearly 9 years, I was an employee of MyNet. I fully retired from that position the end of January and have done some very light consulting work since then.
Okay, so if we have nothing else at this time, and we just did a very quick review of the agenda. Is everybody good with that? Okay, and I would like to move on to number 4, the approval of the minutes from a previous meeting of May 19, 2021.
I move to approve the minutes as written.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have discussion? All in favor? Anyone
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries, minutes approved. Thank you. Item number 5, open for public questions.
Madam Chair, there are no people in the audience waiting to be heard.
Jason, are there any in the virtual community there that wishes to speak?
No, there's only staff on the call.
Okay.
Isn't there a public comment in the email that Karen sent out tonight? Or sent out this morning?
Yes, I did send out, along with the minutes, several emails that had been received by the city.
Do those emails need to be read to the budget committee?
I would assume that everybody has read them. They were all sent. We can just make reference to the fact that they were sent out in advance, and they will become part of the permanent record.
Did the budget committee have a chance to review those comments?
Yes.
Are we all comfortable moving forward then? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Dory.
Okay, thank you. Now let's move on to item 6 on the agenda, a review of the questions submitted and staff responses.
So I would like to start out with this. We shared the Q&A with you earlier today. Did everybody have a chance to look at that? Okay, so where I wanted to start was earlier this week, I sent out the, or maybe it was last week after our meeting, the schedule of transfers. There was a lot of questions in the budget committee questions as well concerning transfers. So I would kind of like to go through that document that I had sent and give you a little overview or a little more information about that. So I think Jason's going to share that, that document for our virtual audience. That is the Q&A. Yes, perfect. Thank you, Jason. So right on top is the debt service, and the debt service transfers, starting with the general fund transfers half of the annual debt service payment to the urban renewal fund. The city is considered half, has taken half of that debt. So urban renewal increment taxes pay half of it, and general revenues pay half.
Yeah, just to be clear, that is for the ICC building. So that's for the city hall building that we're in right now. So the general fund pays half, and the urban renewal district pays for half of that debt service payment.
Yes,
Roden has her hands raised. I don't know if she wants to ask a question now or if it's just up from before.
Yeah, I do have a question. I didn't get an email about the Q&A, so I don't know if I can be sent that, but I didn't review any of that, so I did not receive that.
Okay, I didn't send it to your personal email. I sent it to the city email. Shall I send it to your personal?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Council Morton has her hand up too.
Gloria, as you go through this, can you identify which transfers are just movement of money between funds and which transfers are repayments of loans and what the difference is?
Yes, I can talk about that.
Thank you.
So right off the top, all of these are just transfers of money from one fund to another. None of these are interfund loan payments. Back to the debt service transfers, the ones from that go to the special assessment loan fund, those are the city's portion of the debt service for the Hoffman Road Ash Creek project. That and so this is the city share of that project. There is also payment that we receive from the other benefiting properties, which was Medallion Cabinets and Marquee Spas and Fox Properties. So they also pay a portion of this debt service. The Water SDC fund is transferring to the water fund for the debt service on water projects back from in I believe it was 2017 that the water utility did a large project or a couple of large projects, and instead of using directly SDC funds, it was the decision that the eligible SDC portion of those projects would contribute to the debt service. The
Councilor
Go ahead.
Morton, put your hands if you don't have a question.
Go ahead, Councilor Roden.
Councilor Roden and Councilor Morton have their hands raised still, and I'm not sure they mean to. Okay.
Thank you. Next, the other type of transfers is operational support. And the operational support is the general fund and the economic development loan fund transfers money to the tourism and events fund. And this is to help support operations of that fund because it is not self-supporting. The reserve funds transfers. So there's a number of these transfers, and these transfers are for two reserve funds or the capital projects fund to help fund those specific projects that are done in those funds. So for instance, the transfers going into the information services reserve fund are for IT type items, computers, laptops, anything that's IT related. It also pays for all of our software, basically, and software support. So all of those reserve transfers are for doing specific projects, and most of those transfers can be tied into the capital improvement plan, the CIP. Next is the franchise fees and the franchise revenue sharing. A number of years ago, we, in support of the general fund transferring to the water fund, and that started out to be 80% of the data franchise fees that we received from those companies that charge for that anyway. And we did that transfer to help support the water fund in assisting Minet to pay their debt service shortages. For the one that goes from the general fund to the transportation fund, that is a portion of the franchise fees that help support the transportation fund. In some cities, franchise fees are collected totally in the transportation fund. We are one of the many cities that collects transportation or franchise fees in the general fund. But the transportation fund with the state gas tax revenues is not self-supporting. So we decided this would be an efficient way to help support the transportation fund. For overhead allocations, this is the main one that there's most of the questions about from the budget committee. And this is the other operating funds transferring to the general fund monies that cover the cost of administration and everything that's involved in the administration, and it's basically in payment of the services that the departments of the general fund provide internally to these other operating funds. A few years ago, we did have a cost allocation plan prepared. And what that would do would be to directly allocate administrative type expenditures directly to these funds. And we haven't implemented that plan because it would be harder to show how those expenses are allocated. It does come down to, it would be about the same amount that would be allocated. You just wouldn't, it would just be directly in, and you wouldn't see it as transparently as this. So next is the administrative fees. These are the SDC funds pay the general fund 5% for, they pay the general fund 5% for administrative costs of in administering the SDCs, which are system development charges. System development charges require a lot of special accounting and tracking, and the use of them are restricted in their usage. So this is the way that we show the their share of the cost to administer those monies. So back to Councillor Morton's question regarding interfund loans. So the transfers are absolutely separate to interfund loans. And the interfund loans are loans from one fund to another. They're just like, and they have, in the form of a resolution, is basically a promissory note that that fund that is receiving that loan will pay that back. And the amortization period for that is 10 years. And there is in the section 4 on page 4.14 in your document is the payments that are in the budget for the interfund loans. Those are only interfund loans and don't include the transfers. Okay, so these are payments as scheduled in the following amortization schedule that will be performed during the fiscal year 2022. So the transportation fund will make a payment their total payments from the transportation fund will be $44,590. So all of the payments out equal the payments in. The detail on those payments is following on the following pages. and it's taken directly from the amortizations there on those pages. Is there anything else you would like to know about the transfers? Are there any questions regarding transfers? Okay, hearing none, I will go on to the kind of a summary of the Q&A, and I believe that the city manager wanted to talk about SDCs.
Yeah, so thank you, Gloria. This wasn't a common question, but there was a question on what was in the capital improvement plan for SDC methodology and fee studies. And I really couldn't answer the question without kind of writing a book. So I figured I might just kind of use the opportunity to just kind of walk through it with you, because it does get pretty complicated. And if you notice, there's some pretty high dollar numbers there. And that's because there's a tremendous amount of work that has to be done in order to put those together. So we always you always should follow up your master plans with an SDC methodology and fee study. And the reason is because you have a brand new list of capital projects that you know for certain are going to be what are needed over the 20-year timeline for the projects. Usually your methodology is looking at a 5 to 10 year type of a list to do things. But since you have a fresh list of projects, you can really kind of make certain that you can identify how you're going to pay for those projects. And that's a really important part of it. You don't want to have a whole list of projects and then absolutely no idea how you're going to pay for it. And so it's a really good timeline to do that. But it gets really complicated really quick, especially when you're talking about system development charges. And so I'll kind of talk about that in a minute. But when you're talking about capital projects, there's really 3 ways to pay for capital projects. Those are outside monies, and that's what Independence has been really good at chasing down, and what we're still working very hard on, even currently, to chase down monies, because any outside monies that we get, whether they be grants or a capital campaign or anything else, are less monies that the users have to pay for their rates. So that's less money for user fees. It's also less money for development fees, so for system development charges. So any money that we can pull from outside of our community to pay for capital projects is where we look first. Independence has been incredibly successful in that in the past, and we're hoping, especially with the American Rescue Plan monies, as well as if there's an infrastructure bill that passes, to go and chase down those monies as much as we can and get as much as we can into the community. So outside monies, user fees, those are the things that you see on your water bill typically. Those are fees for services that are needed for sanitary water projects. Those have both a maintenance and operations component, but they also have a capital component, and that capital component usually is a large portion of that user fee. So being really thoughtful about how you do your capital projects, when you do your capital projects, how you put those together, makes a big difference in those rate fee structures. And so that is something that you want to study. The other piece is development fees, where system development charges, and that is really related to growth. So when you put together your capital improvement plan, you're going to identify projects. Some of those projects are maintenance and operations, and some of those are just because the city's growing. There's more people coming in, there's new housing developments, there's other things. And the state allows you to charge a fee for that to pay for the expansion of the services, whether it be a sewer lift station that's needed, and we have needed to upgrade and increase a number of those just because of the growth we've seen and the growth that we're going to see. Transportation, that is another one. We're finishing up our transportation system plan, and we're seeing some projects that are certainly being identified as issues because of the increased growth coming into the city. So it's really important to find that right balance between what a developer should pay, what a use should be in user fees, and then how much money we can actually chase down. And so in order to do that, you have to go through a lot of analysis. And probably the biggest issue or the biggest cost of that is actually doing your system development charge methodologies. We haven't had a system development charge methodology done since 1998, so it's been a long time. And if you take a look at the way that they're put together, they are typical to what you would see that in that time frame, but you can certainly do a lot better on figuring out what the units are for those different things. So for example, in transportation, there are just 4 categories, land use categories that we use: single family, multifamily, commercial, and industrial. Well, you have the whole ITE manual that actually spells out what all the different types of users are going to put as demand on the system. So it makes a lot more sense to actually break that out into the different components. So you don't have a commercial user who has very low volume coming out paying the same amount that a doctor is paying for their office who has very high traffic trips and counts. So that's certainly something that can be refined, and one of the things that we plan on doing. You have kind of the same type of thing in sewer. It's based on meter size, where most cities actually do what's called an equivalent dwelling unit, which is actually what amount of sewer can go down a sink or toilet or something else. So it's a much more refined way of doing things. And so, really the effort here is to go through and figure out what the appropriate unit of measure is to use, and then go through a process of determining exactly how much of growth is expected during that period of time. And that can be, simple for some things, like water meters, because it's really just typically houses and things. It can be really complicated for things like transportation, where you have all sorts of different kind of users coming in. So there's a tremendous amount of effort that goes into figuring out how much growth you're going to have over that time. And then you also have to take every project and figure out how much of that project is actually related to growth and how much of it's actually related to operations and maintenance. So, you have your list of projects that comes out of your master plans and your TSP, but you got to go through each one of those projects and divide it up into its individual components to make sure that you're charging the fair amount for each one of those. And then there's 2 different kinds of system development charges. One is for improvement projects that are going to happen. And then there's also projects that have happened that had a growth related component to them as well. So you have to go back and figure out how much of that was actually related to growth, how much of it was related to other things, and how much of SDCs may have been already collected on it. So, and then once you're done with all that, it's really easy. You just divide the cost that you have by the growth, and you end up with the number. But getting there is a lot of work. It's work that consultants very much specialize in the state. And it takes a lot of staff work as well, because they really don't know your community and they can't really make some of those decisions. But that is what goes into that. And then fees, are the corollary to that. It's not the development portion, but it's the remainder of the capital improvement plan that you need to put together. And so you have to go through that entire analysis as well. So sorry for the long answer. I just couldn't figure out a way to type that out in a short period of time. It was a great question. It is in our capital improvement plan for this year for our transportation system plan, which we just finished. So we'll follow that up with the transportation SDC methodology and fee study, as well as the sewer, because we are finishing up the sewer master plan here in a couple of months. So great time to do those. We also plan on doing the water master plan next year. So there'll be another great study and methodology for that the following year, and then storm sewer as well. So we'll follow that up with parks, but definitely a lot of work to do. Once we get the master plans done, our work isn't done for the staff. It's just getting started. And the good thing about that is and one of the reasons I wanted to just kind of go into a little bit depth is because council and others are going to walk through this process. We're going to actually, be talking about this. Ultimately, these are decisions that are made at the city council level regarding, making sure that the development community is fine, or if we want to incentivize a certain portion of something for some reason, that is something that the council will have to work through. So there'll be a lot more conversations about that, especially about fees. One thing that you probably may have noticed or may not have, but there is no user fee for streets or transportation. There is a system development charge, but there isn't any user fees. We do collect gas tax and we do collect franchise fees, but that isn't enough to cover the operations and maintenance of the streets that we have. And so that will definitely be something that is being done in this process. It will be complicated, and it's going to, probably lead to some conversations about how we're actually going to maintain our system for the long haul with just what we have.
Okay, so I think that are you good?
Yeah, I'm done with that, but let me open it up for any questions because I do have one more item that I'm going to cover next. So if there's no questions on that, I was going to cover one more question that came up. And that was related to the question of whether money that has been allocated for the South Trail project, Willamette Trail project, could be moved to the multi-field use at the sports park. And the answer is no, essentially. And the reason is because there isn't any money set aside for the South Trail project, the Willamette Trail project. The way it works in the capital improvement plan is we have the fiscal year that we're currently in. And if you take a look at that column, that is all in the budget and everything balances in the budget. And everything in the future years is really aspirational. That's money, those are the costs of the projects that we need to do, but we don't necessarily have the money for that. And that's especially true in the Parks Fund. So you'll see $108,000 allocated this year to the South Willamette Trail project, but that was a grant that we received from the state. So, and that grant is specifically for that project, so that those monies can't move around. And the other monies in the future years for that project are simply grants that we hope to get, or outside money and investments that we want to track down to get those monies. Currently, the Parks SDC fund collects around $150,000 a year, and we have about $33,000 in contingency in that fund. We do have some contingency in the Parks Capital Reserve Fund of about $264,000, and that's it. So there isn't any more money. All that money is for all 8 of the projects that are on the list, and that's why we are careful to divide that up pretty carefully. But there isn't this pot of money out there that we have that we could take from one project and move to another that's really aspirational. So what we typically do is we put together a feasibility study, and that's what we propose for this year for the multi-use field, is to take a look at, to get community input, to make sure we know what the residents want, to get a conceptual design layout, to figure out what to build and where to build it. We want to maximize the multi-use portion of the project, because we know that there are many different type of activities that can happen out there. We need to figure out how much all that's going to cost and how it can be phased. We need to figure out what the funding alternatives are. And then most importantly, at least for me, is, what operational structures and costs are there? How are we actually going to manage that as we develop that, and where things come in that requires more maintenance, more operations, more staff, all sorts of different items that we need to have answers to before we get too far down the road. So that's why we have $40,000 in the budget this year, is to do that feasibility study and get our feet under us to make sure we understand how to efficiently and effectively develop that. But the great thing about doing that, and where Independence has been successful, is when you do a feasibility study, that really, and especially when you have community input into that, you then really can go out and sell the project. You can go find the money. You can go find the opportunities out there to try to fund those projects, and they're pretty expensive. This project's in the floodplain, and it has a lot of different things going on. So that is, something that we absolutely want to do. It's a priority that the council made clear to us that they wanted to pursue, and our feeling is we need to go make sure we understand exactly what we're going to do, and then go aggressively chase down the money to try to make that happen. I think the good news on that project as well is there's also this private funding that can come alongside to make that happen. So with that, I see some hands raised, but I definitely wanted to cover that one item.
Councilor Job, I think you had yours up before me, so you go ahead.
Thank you, Councilor Core. I was reading those letters from the, I think there were 19 individuals that sent in those letters about wanting the multi-use field and kind of their support of it. And I thought that was great. So I did want to say thank you to everyone who did write in and give your opinion on that and let your voice be heard. So thank you.
My question is back to the Q&A, Tom. Councilor Roden asked a question about the IGA support, and you said 8,000 of that goes to the Gate for Warming Center. You and I have had an email conversation about that recently, because my understanding is the Gate is not serving as a warming center. Instead, Foursquare Church is. So why is money allocated to the Gate, and are we doing anything to support Foursquare?
Currently the city isn't doing anything directly to support Foursquare. The Gate agreement was something that kind of was done as I came in. I'm going to have a conversation with them. I mean, it is for warming center services, but there are also other things that they can do for the city that are in the agreement. So I think before we make that payment this year, we need to sit down and have a conversation and make sure that there's a fair exchange for value on that. So we have to put it in the budget just as a thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean I need to expend it. But it is a part of our agreement. So we want to make sure we're covered if it's appropriate to make that payment. So.
Thank you. Councilor Roden has a hand up now.
Hi, I'm just a little, frustrated that we can't just look at, instead of a feasibility project for the independent sports park, there's no way in this budget to get them a little bit more money. I mean, if we're looking at things, and you said repeatedly, the reason why we're not doing the independent sports park is because we have to make sure it's going to make money. But then we gave a whole bunch of money to the museum, and we know it's not going to make any money. And we're going to give $1 million to that. And then we have the library who wants to have this huge expansion to it, which is going to cost a ton of money, and it's not going to have any return either. And so we're looking at the independent sports park, and we can see there's going to be a huge return on that. Is there any way we could contact our congressmen and representatives who have donated $1 million each of them to this trolley to try to get that money to the sports park? Is there something we can do in the immediate future to get some money towards that project?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there is. I mean, we're certainly not going to wait till we have a feasibility in hand to go chase the money down. Matter of fact, when we were looking at the congressional directed spending, that was one of the first questions that we asked. And, the answer we got was pretty straightforward from our consultant, and that is federal projects don't fund parks projects. The reality is they feel that is a local responsibility, and so trying to get federal funds for that isn't something that they're willing to do. We certainly have talked about this at the state level, because that actually where money can come from in order to support these kind of things. So, the Minute Council in February told us this was a priority. We've been looking for different grant opportunities and other things to find ways to pay for this. The other thing that I've looked at, as well, is the American Rescue Plan. Is there a possibility to, leverage some funding from that in order for this? But unfortunately, those infrastructure dollars are specifically related to water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So there may be an angle there when the rules come out, but you also have to prove that it was impacted by COVID. So we're looking at everything. Everything's a good idea because It's going to take some capital. But the nice thing about this project is it can really be phased in over time. I mean, baseball is absolutely going to be a component of this project. There's no question about that, I don't think, just from what we learned in the past and what we know today. But it can be phased, and I think that's the nice thing is we can really kind of build this, over time. Or if we get a large sum of money, we can do it, much more quickly. But we got to make sure that we understand exactly what we're trying to build and where the community wants us to go in order to make that happen.
If I could add a little bit to that as well. I'd just like to say that, there is a mechanism in budget law that would allow, if money and funding came along for a project like that, we can accept that money and we can do the projects, and we just go through a supplemental budget process. So, the door's not closed on it this year. It's just, we just don't have the funding in this budget. It doesn't mean that, if that funding does come along, that door opens again.
Well, and I appreciate you saying this. I just think that we could do better at funding this year, and I'm willing to fight for that so that we can do better for this year. And I'm wondering how much of this MyNet debt that we pay every single year could go to the sports park. And is the money going to the trolley? Is that what you were saying, Tom, is from federal representatives and senators? It's not from the state?
That the money for the trolley is definitely coming from the state. It is coming from representative and senators who serve our area, who've agreed to use a certain allocation of their money for that project. So,
did they know that there was a sports park complex project that we were trying to look for funding at?
Yeah, they did, but we've been, the trolley project's been out there for years. The sports park, hasn't been on our radar since February. So it takes time to kind of really build the ground support for this. We are out there seeking that. We have mentioned it to them when these conversations have come up, but it's gonna take some time.
Council Morton has a question.
Thank you. People that have a passion for something like the sports field projects, there's no reason a Friends of the Sports Field group can't be formed. There is a community foundation in town that will act as your fiscal agent, so you have the coverage of a 501c3, and grants and funding could be sought through that avenue with citizen-based support. And, what's to stop such a group from contacting the Blazers or something like that and asking for some input in funds?
Dory's got her hand up. Dory, you don't have to raise your hand. You're in charge.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to make sure I got in the appropriate line as long as we're on the topic of the sports park. While I definitely appreciate the enthusiasm for baseball, softball field complex, as a person who served as a commissioner for Parks and Rec, very detailed process that we went through to create our master plan, and the amount of public input that we received over several different public forums. At that time when we were doing this, that the community priority was established in our master plan that we put forth to the council. At this point in time, it is honestly, in my opinion, irrelevant to this budget because of the detail that each department would have to go through, including police, public works, to change their budget. So I would actually like to call for an end of the discussion on the sports park change, that this is something that can go through another channel through the Parks and Rec Commission and the City Council, not this year's budget.
Councilor Roden has her hand up.
I'm flabbergasted at your statement. I mean, we obviously as a city have a very flawed way of surveying our community. When we survey, the vast majority of our participants are high schoolers and university students who don't even live in our community, and then just our friends of city employees who show up for an ice cream social. So I'm not sure that's the actual best way to figure out what our community needs.
Councilor Roden. At this point in time, I would like to end the discussion unless you have something more specific in a different department. The sports park went through several community forums. Hundreds of community members attended each one of those forums over a period of 3 years.
All right, I hear you that you're talking and about it and telling me to be quiet. Maybe we should just read all the emails out loud so that we can hear what the community actually thinks.
Jessica has.
Gloria, would you like to move on to other questions?
Jessica, you're muted. Wait, Jessica wants to ask something.
Sorry. I also feel honestly just a little bit uncomfortable with the enthusiasm. I do think it's a good idea to discuss. Absolutely. It's definitely, I can see the economic benefit, how that can stimulate our local economy when we have visitors coming in for tournaments. But I also feel like, our fiscal year starts in July, right? That's just a little over a month away. And as the city manager was explaining, there's a lot of work that goes into the planning, the scope of work, getting the bids, writing for the grants, right? So I think it's a little unrealistic to think that all of that can happen in less than 2 months. So I think that I also agree with Dory that for the purpose of this fiscal budget, it doesn't really make sense to talk about that right now.
Yeah, and I think, our plan is to really get this foundational document done and then really build from that, because we'll have, and we'll do it quickly because we recognize, when you're talking about capital projects, especially like this, you have a limited window in order to do it. There's your summer season, and, you need to make sure that you're not impacting the existing sports that are going on, but you need to do capital projects and you have weather in Oregon, believe it or not. So we're going to move forward with that really quickly this fiscal year to try to get that work done so that we can prepare for, potential capital projects. Because if we get money, we'd love to be doing something, next spring, summer, winter, and figure that out. So there's no dragging feet here. We're moving this forward. It's just we need, to figure out some of the fundamentals so that we can make sure that we do it right. And there was a comment as well about potentially, having the Parks Board look at parks priorities. That's one of the reasons that we have a Parks and Rec Board. And so, this is one of 8 projects, and it might be an opportunity for them to actually look at the project list again and to give some recommendations to council on how to move forward. So.
Councilor Martin Willis has a question.
Actually, more a comment, because I want Councilor Roden to understand, I absolutely appreciate the passion of a new councilor and a passion for a specific project. But that also in our capital improvement plan, we do have future funding to be determined. And that if, our city is amazing at finding grants and additional funding. And if that funding comes along, then we're happy to invest that. And that, up front, we have set aside $40,000 to look further into that project. It's not as if nothing has been done there. We do have our soccer fields that miraculously survive our, floods each year. And I know that she had drawn a comparison to the park system previously. and the, the 3 million plus price tag on that. But just to draw attention to the fact that for fiscal year 2022, there was only $20,000 assigned to that, and the future expenditures were based on if grant funds were available. So I mean, that it's not as if that is a done deal. So I would encourage, I mean, as well as I know city staff is diligently looking, but if you come across additional funding, potential grant funding that would expedite that process, that, I mean, we're more than happy to do that. So it's not that we're discounting the project at all. It's that for this fiscal year, we've assigned certain amounts to certain projects. And that as far as the capital improvement projects overall, I went through, and where the total amount over the years is a really large sum, we're at a little over 4 million, I believe, for, if my math is correct, can't swear to that, for fiscal year 2022 for all of those projects combined for this fiscal year. So I think it's important to separate this fiscal year from future fiscal year expenditures for all of these projects. So we're not discounting your passion there at all. And I would encourage you to, I mean, to go forth, and if, as Councilor Morton mentioned, can find, private investment in those projects, friends of, I mean, that's how we got a dog park. Was through people who had a passion for that, companies who were willing to contribute fencing, volunteers who were willing to go out and set poles and help to install that fencing. So that would be my suggestion, my recommendation, my input.
Jessica, do you have another question, or did you just not lower your hand?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for your responses. I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate you forgiving my passion. This, I just want to reiterate one more time. This is the one thing that we could fund that would actually bring business into our community. Not like, I love the dog park, but it doesn't bring revenue to our local businesses. It doesn't bring outside traffic in. This does. So the longer we delay, the longer we can recover fully from COVID. And I'm done. I won't talk anymore about it for this next 10 minutes.
All right. Well, I think those were the items that Gloria and I noted that we felt we should talk about for the questions and answers. But there were a lot of other questions, so I'll kind of turn it back over to Gloria to kind of talk about anything else she might have. But I think at this point we're really looking for any other things that you might have that you want to ask questions about from the list that we sent out earlier today.
Thank you. I think the other one that we kind of wanted to do, talk about a little bit, because it's was a question throughout the questions that were submitted, was debt, and in particular the ICC debt and the MyNet debt. The ICC debt is funded, as I went through earlier, by urban renewal, tax increment, and general fund revenues, or general revenues. And so that was a shared project between the city and the urban renewal, and the debt service now is shared. Overall, for all of our debt, the debt service payments in the funds where they're budgeted, those are hard and fast. Those cannot be changed. If we changed any of our debt service and decided to use the funds for debt service payments in a different way, we would default on our debt. We would be no longer eligible for grants. the federal government would come down on us really hard. We would lose a whole lot of our funding and our momentum. So I just want to let you know that we try really hard to decrease the debt we have. And as I mentioned at the council meeting on last night, through refunding our debt at a lower cost, lower interest rates. And we are always exploring opportunities for that. It doesn't extend the debt, it just lowers the cost of that debt. The MyNet debt this year, so for their debt service payment that's due the 1st of June, they are going to pay 100% of it. This will be the first year in several years that they've that we have had, the city has had to provide any shortages for the MyNet debt. And for next year, they're estimating only $90,000, which I know that that's a big number, but it's a lot lower number than it has been in the past. So MyNet is working hard at being able to cover their debt, but it is ultimately the city's responsibility because that debt is in the name of the city. So I just wanted to cover that a little bit with you so that, and hopefully answers any of those questions about debt. And from there, that was really the main questions, was transfers, debt, the park, and those items. So if there's any other of those questions that were submitted or any additional questions, we'd love to hear from you and talk about it.
Looks like Joe has a hand up for you.
Yes.
I did have a couple of questions that didn't get answered. On the MyNet debt, I had asked for just like one number for the debt. So how much is owed, including money that hasn't been paid to utilities or wherever it's supposed to be shuffled. I want to know how much the debt is for MyNet.
The debt for MyNet is shown on page 4.1, and the balance at 6/30/2021 will be $9,405,000.
Okay, and that is everything for MyNet.
Okay, so the next part of that is MyNet owes the city for their debt service shortages over time. Let me see where I put that in. The questions, because I know I put it in there.
And Councilor Joe, excuse me. So just to comment on answering the questions, it might seem like we were getting a little short on some of our answers, and that was because we were just pressed for time.
I totally understand that. That was just, it's something that everybody wonders is, what is the MyNet debt? And I can't answer it. I don't have the exact number. So that's what I was wondering.
Okay, so I thought I had put it in here in that. So if you'll give me a minute, sure, and I will look at our audit and I can give you that number.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll mention that number isn't included in the budget because we don't have a repayment schedule for it yet. So typically when we don't have a repayment schedule, we're not showing the debt that's out there. So that's something that needs to be worked out over the future. But she can certainly give you that total number, what it is.
Okay, thank you.
Florian, Nathan has his hand up, and then Councilor Roden.
Yeah, thank you. I did have only one question. This is my first budget committee, so I didn't have a lot to contribute. But the question I had was the IT department requested additional staff, and then that was decided to go elsewhere with that and deny that request. And in the question, or the answer to my question, it was see this other question, and the answer to that didn't really answer my question. So I guess I'm just going back to what was the justification for not getting that additional help for IT? Because I see a lot of these capital improvement plans, which are amazing and great. A lot of IT infrastructure undergirds that and has a foundational piece to supporting that. And from my understanding, from my own research, our IT department is pretty small. I think one person. So that is kind of concerning. And I just wanted to know what the justification for that was.
Yeah, well, certainly, we get requests for additional staffing, and this is a staff that works really, really hard. And there's no question that our IT staff does incredible and amazing things, especially for being one person. And I'll tell you that the IT staffing, is not only supported from the IT department, but is supported by mostly other departments in the city, and we know that. The bottom line is when we came down to looking at the budget at the very end, we had to make a decision. Are we going to take more money out of our utility funds, or are we not? Or are there other places in the budget where we can cut? We ended up having cutting in a number of different places in the budget and travel and training, city manager budget, council budget. We made a lot of adjustments in order to get that number down to about where it was last year. It's even still a little bit higher than last year, but unfortunately, we are just like every other city where we have to live with inside of a budget, or we want to live inside what we are receiving, and IT is really going to be highly in the general fund, and so that is an area where property taxes increases just simply don't keep up with the increase in personnel costs that we have. And so it's a decision. It's a hard decision. It's a decision that Gloria and I primarily made in order to make sure that we're being very respectful of that number from the utility transfers and keeping it consistent. That number has been coming down fairly significantly over time. But we were about equal. I think we're actually $140,000 over where we were last year. But tough decisions need to be made, and I think that everybody would like to have more IT support and more coverage. And certainly, COVID was a big burden on that department as well. But simply, we wanted to propose a balanced budget. That's the bottom line.
Okay, thank you, Tom, for that. I absolutely appreciate that we're trying to make sure that everything stays balanced and that we have that, responsibility to the taxpayers to do that and to ourselves. But especially over the last year, 2020, we saw how much we leaned on technology, and we're not going to decrease our capital improvement project goals. And I just saw that as kind of a little bit of my own background. I used to manage the Oregon State University computer help desk team when I was in college, and we had a very robust team, and we were always overworked. And so our IT guy Jason, he's probably working miracles on a daily basis. But if it's one guy managing all of this IT, you have failure baked into the system because there's absolutely no redundancy. So, and I'm sure everybody knows that, and I'm not the first person to recognize that. But sometimes IT, in my experience, usually gets glossed over. As long as the computers work, everybody's happy. But when they don't, then everything fails. So I just wanted to put that out there and put my 2 cents in. So thank you.
Councillor Core, you're muted.
Councillor Roden, then me, then Councillor Joe.
Okay.
I was hoping to get a list of how many debts we have that are not included in this because they don't have a repayment schedule. So I'd be interested in seeing how many of those are, because I'm not really sure we're looking at an accurate budget if we can just, not include the debts we don't have the intent to pay right now. So I would like to see a list of that, all those if possible. And then where in here is the Civic Center debt and how we're paying that off?
So the debt payments are all within the budget.
Except for the ones that don't have a repayment schedule, correct?
Right, because that's not in our current budget. We don't have any payments due on those, so they're not.
How does that work? Like if I decided not to pay my credit card, how does that work for a city? Like if you have, how much do you estimate the MyNet debt is that you don't have a payment schedule for? And is there not a payment schedule for the Civic Center as well?
Yes, there is.
Wow. Okay, thank you. I think seeing a list would be important.
I think let's kind of take one of the questions at a time. And so for the Civic Center debt, on page 3.53, it's the urban renewal, excuse me, 3.52. It's the urban renewal debt service fund. And that's where those payments come out of. So for next year, there's the 2016A, 2017A principal. Both of those are principal payments. And then down further, there's the interest payments. So those are the payments that are scheduled for next year and budgeted. So this budget is only contemplating 1 year. So this is 1 year's budget.
But you will get us a list of the, let me see, I wrote it down.
And in section 4 is all of the debt. And then let's see, where did I answer that one? I'm looking for that answer in the Q&A.
May I suggest that since she's looking, this might be a time for a bathroom break?
I vote for that.
Sounds good.
When do you want us back, Madam Chair?
Is 10 minutes fine?
So 7:55?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Do we have everyone back?
I'm back. I know you can't see me. This is Dawn Roden.
Cute dog, though.
Thank you. I like her.
Are we ready to resume?
Yeah, if everyone's back, I've got a question, and then Councilor Joe will follow me.
Okay, I would like to answer the questions that were on board first. Great. So Councilor Job had asked the question about how much MyNet owed the city. And that number is $3,254,603. And those are in the form of promissory notes. And there's not a date determined yet when they'll start paying on those. So to the to Councilor Roden's question regarding the debt in total, in the Q&A, Councilor Job had posed basically that same question as well. And so up on your screen is the question at page 4.9. And the response there is yes, that was correct. However, so in addition to that, and what isn't in the amortization schedules that show principal and interest payments, is the loan that we're working on for the sewer projects. That's a DEQ loan. I believe we've got a couple more years yet before we'll be finishing up on that. That balance currently is at 6.4 million. And then the Independence Landing public improvements is, we will start paying on that this next fiscal year 2022. That payment is shown in the Urban Renewal Debt Service Fund. And the balance on that, when we close it, should be $2,726,175. So that is all of the loans that we have that that we're currently paying on and that we're currently not yet closed on.
Yeah, and I'll just answer, really briefly that these are both state loans, and the state packages their loans together. They sell these in large bond chunks to the market, and so they, in order to do that, they need to have exact figures and exact calculations of what everything is at. So that's why they don't want you to be making payments until you actually have a final number. They can go out to the bond market and get the best deal they possibly can in order to structure those. So you're right, it's not like getting a loan from a typical bank. It's getting a loan from the state, and they have their own process about repayment on those.
Okay, so we can move on to the next questions.
Thanks, Gloria. I just wanted to ask about one of my questions that I didn't think was fully answered either, kind of like Nathan's. And I realize an awful lot of work went into answering these questions, and I really appreciate the effort you put forward here. I don't mean to be critical. I just want to make sure that I'm clear on what the answer is. Regarding the additional IT staff, we haven't always live streamed or broadcast all the committee, commissions, and board meetings, unless I've missed something. We've only done city council meetings, budget committee meetings and I believe planning commission meetings, but correct me if I'm wrong. So if the new normal going forward is that we're going to live stream and broadcast every committee, commission, and board meeting to include the new climate, whatever we call it, that seems like a huge load. And I realize that various members of staff can pick up certain parts of that. It's not necessarily something that the IT director has to do. And maybe it's something that we look at possibly delegating to commission committee chairs at some point. I don't know, but I just want to make that point. And also, as we move forward with this verbal, written, digital communications effort that we've been talking about for a couple of years now, hardware, software, and maintenance is going to follow that. And I just think we're maybe shortchanging ourselves a bit here. And I just want to put that out there for food for thought. I'm not asking to change anything in the budget. I'm just saying let's keep that thought alive.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
Councilor Core, the one thing I'll add to that in the response is if you remember correctly, we are adding a communications person, and that person would be available to do a lot of those type of activities and take the load off. I don't think the new normal is going to be going back to broadcasting every board and commission meeting, but certainly the ones that we were doing previously, we will continue to do.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Jobe, your turn.
I had a question on the commercial kitchen. I had an additional question in there that wasn't answered. So there was $100,000 grant for the commercial kitchen, and I had asked what I guess you're calling it a manager, project manager. They were paid $25,000 to get that started up, and I was wondering who that individual was, and then it looks like there's another individual. So there was someone who started the project and then someone who's finishing the project. So I was just wondering who those people are.
So Sean Irvine is the department head that answers that question and would be available.
To test to see if Sean's actually listening.
Good thing I was actually sitting here, right? Yeah, so appreciate the question there. So yeah, with the kitchen project, the grant included $25,000 for a kitchen manager who would help with some of the kind of the initial setup before it got going, kind of policy development, operations manuals, and kind of how people should, can and cannot use the kitchen, things like that. And then to essentially operate not operate, but to sort of oversee and supervise, kind of some of the initial operations of the kitchen to make sure, for example, that get people in the habit of making sure that cleaning is to a adequate level after people have been there, make sure that people are actually following the procedures that have been identified, and then of course adjusting those policies and procedures, depending on how things go and depending on what's observed. So that position was initially hired in December with a woman named Martha Jurovic. She ran, or essentially helped us with a lot of that, kind of the initial policy development. In I believe it was the end of March, she decided that essentially that she wanted to kind of move on to some other things, and so we mutually agreed to cancel to end the contract where it stood, and then we went out and were able to actually get Jeff James, who's a very experienced restaurateur from Salem. He and his wife and extended family own several restaurants in the area, and so he's been helping, just a kind of a little bit of final tweaks before the kitchen opened, and then he's really been helping with tours, getting people oriented to the kitchen, kind of getting some of the last equipment identified and purchased that needed to be acquired, and then he's actually been doing some good consulting and mentoring with some of the entrepreneurs and potential kitchen users who are coming in as well.
Okay, and then is that a free service for people, or what exactly is it doing?
So the kitchens, no, sorry, I guess I should have, backed up to that. So the kitchen itself is going to operate in many ways like a co-working space where you've got essentially a licensed commercial kitchen that that people can come in and rent by the hour, by the day, to do a food-based product. And this is really intended to be a more of a business entrepreneurship type of a thing. So, if I'm going to have a big family gathering and I need to make, 5 turkeys for dinner, I would not be able to go and rent this place. I would need to, to rent it, you need to have your own, kind of food handler's license. You have your own certification, either through Polk County or the USDA for whatever it is you're making. There's some additional permitting and processes that come in, but it provides that kind of middle step from your own kitchen to investing yourself in your own commercial kitchen in your own facility. And so, but yeah, it is it is rentable, or it's a pay to play system, I should say.
Okay, and how much does the city think that we're gonna make off of the kitchen?
So in this case, I would equate it to a kind of in many ways like a facade grant, where we're essentially helping spin up what is essentially a private enterprise. This is it's a partnership with Indie Commons, the co-working space there. They're the ones who are going to operate and manage this thing in the longer term. There's a companion nonprofit called Indie Idea Hub that is you're going to handle some of the entrepreneurship programming, to support entrepreneurs. But this is essentially, the city is fostering an entrepreneurship resource within the community that should, kind of pay off in the longer term, in much the same way that we,
Okay,
support a building owner who's going to reinvest in their building.
okay, I just didn't understand that. So Indie Commons is actually who owns the commercial kitchen,
Correct.
and we just did the grant.
Yeah, we're helping
Okay.
develop it essentially.
Okay, that makes more sense. I guess I didn't understand that. Thank you.
Yep.
And I'd just like to throw in open house on the kitchen is June 12th from 1 to 5. If you'd like to come by and see what the city has helped to invest in. I have a space here. It's been amazing to watch the process. So.
You're muted, Gloria.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, so at this point, I would turn it back over to the committee chair and check in on progress.
Yeah, so checking in on progress. Thank you very much, everyone, for your questions. I thought they were very good and detailed. So checking in on how we're doing. How is everybody feeling about continuing with this meeting this evening, adjourning and coming in on the next week?
Let's keep going and finish this puppy.
I agree.
Excellent. Okay.
Okay,
So
with
that's if.
Oh, sorry, Dory.
I was going to say, so if Gloria, if we are done with the review of the questions, we can move to item 7, the review of the capital improvement plan.
So we had kind of gone through that last week in the first meeting pretty well. So if there's any questions on that, maybe we should go that way instead of doing a whole nother review on it.
Okay, do any of our committee members have any additional questions on the CIP?
Okay, and so then the next item, Dory, was unless there's, we'd rather, instead of the department heads, they are all available, instead of doing summaries or summarizing their narratives. If there's specific questions from the committee, then they're available to answer those.
Okay, so moving on, Jen, to item 8. Does the committee have any questions for any of the department heads regarding their budget narratives? Okay, so let's go ahead and Move down to item 9.
So here, I guess, as the city manager had introduced at the beginning of the meeting, if this is the budget committee's opportunity to discuss anything, the budget. You've had the opportunity to review it and submit questions, review questions. And so if this is kind of your opportunity to check in with each other and talk about the budget and where you want to go from here.
Okay, so Councillor Core, if you can, again, please keep an eye on hands raised if anybody would like to start discussion.
Nobody's raised their hand. Oh, Councilor Roden just raised her hand.
I was just wondering if we could have a little bit more time to go over the answers to the questions and answers that came out today before we make a decision on this.
Did you have I'm sorry, Councillor Roden, did you want us to go through every one of the questions, or did you have a specific one or two in mind that you were looking at?
Well, I just didn't feel that none of us had enough time to really go through all the answers. I know in more detail. I wasn't sure if that was something that we would want to wait another week before we answer this, or what is the procedure for this process?
Does any other committee member have
Councilor
further
Ward.
desire?
Marilyn?
Thank you. I think we have had adequate and more than adequate time to go over this, especially based on past years' processes for the budget passage. We've had some extremely rich and valuable discussions. I think we've got a lot of things on the table that needed to be put there and for future consideration, but I don't think there's a lot more to consider on the questions. And if there are still concerns by individuals that are not shared by the group at large, perhaps that can be taken care of on a private basis.
So in deference to our newer committee members, typically we go through these as just basic overview on the questions. Sorry, let me go back. So Councilor Roden, you're looking for further discussion on the entire Q&A form, is that correct?
Well, there's just things I didn't understand. I mean, obviously you guys can go through it, but I didn't understand, the amount of debt we're in, how we're the unpayable debts, just those types of things that I had some concerns about. It seems as if we are in quite a bit of debt, and I was just going to seek further information on if it's really as bad as I feel it is.
Yeah, I mean, one comment we'll make, and I think Gloria mentioned it earlier, is there really isn't anything we can do in this particular budget year about debt. And so if there are questions out there about, debt and the city's position, we're absolutely happy to answer those over time and make sure that everybody has the information they need to completely understand what's going on. That's part of our role. But, we're in a situation where debt is something from the past, and we have debt repayment schedules for everything. Those are all included in the budget and all balanced and are supported there. So there really isn't a whole lot that I think the budget committee could really change, or anything that the budget committee could change relative to those type of conversations.
I've got my hand up, and then Councilor Martin Willis is after me. I just want to make a comment. Councilor Roden, I've had issues with the budget too, and trying to understand things. I took some time last year, or year before, I believe it was, and sat down with Gloria. And she walked me through various pieces and parts of it. It was very helpful. I think sometimes with these complex documents, you just actually need to sit down and with a pen and pencil and, you know, write yourself notes in the margins based on whatever guidance or advice Gloria can offer. But it was very helpful for me to go through that process.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I am more
Yeah,
than happy to do that, Counselor Roden.
I appreciate that. I just am trying to get to the point where we can say we can't do anything about our debt this fiscal year because we didn't plan for it. And so I'm wondering, you know, what can we do in the future so that we can look at this debt and maybe, you know, Counselor Kaur's right. I just need to sit down and have this discussion. But I feel powerless to this, and so that's frustrating to me.
Well, and I guess what I'd like to add is that it's not that we didn't plan for our debt. I mean, our existing debt has been planned for. We have managed it. And I do recall as a new counselor, and now looking at state budgets as well, that sometimes the numbers that you're dealing with they're not what we deal with in household budgets. And so it can really appear that, oh my gosh, we have these millions of dollars in debt. But then the reality of that is that the income is also substantially more than what you would deal with in a household budget. So I do understand your frustration. I absolutely agree with Counselor Kaur. I mean, dive into the documents that we have and utilize our staff. They do an exceptional job every year. I know when I first came onto the budget committee, I don't know, some 11 years ago, that we literally had the current year to deal with, and that now we're actually given a look back to previous fiscal years. And that was a really significant change that I think helps out the budget committee. So you can at least do a comparative analysis of where we were and where we are. Gloria always does a really phenomenal job of providing us summaries. Obviously, there are questions about where things are found, and this is actually a really cleaned up version of what we used to receive as our budget. So thank you, Gloria, for all your work over the years. But yeah, absolutely utilize staff and their knowledge, and they'll walk you through this. And Dawn, I promise next year will be so much easier for you, and Counselor Job, for you as well. The budget will seem a little less foreign.
Counselor Roden has her hand up.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I'm trying not to, you know, be sensitive to the fact that I'm being called ignorant on this. I really think that the debt that we have in Independence is extremely high. And even if you try to look outside of my household and we put it on a city debt level, we still have a tremendously high debt. And it's kind of misleading when we say we have a balanced budget when we're not even including millions of dollars in debt that we just don't have any area in the budget to say we're actually paying for it. So I am concerned. I feel that my concerns are justified. And I feel that next year when we come back to this, if we still have this amount of debt to income ratio and this much debt in our community, that it's just something that it's now my responsibility. So I want to make sure that I express my opinion on that.
Counselor Roden, I definitely appreciate that. And it has been a very large learning curve for myself when I first started on budget committee. And you know, to repeat what Counselor Martin Willis had said, that it looks on paper with all of these numbers a little bit different than it is. And then, you know, again, like Counselor Kaur said, utilize Gloria as much as you can, because it is very confusing and hard to understand your first time out. It really is.
Counselor Job has her hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to weigh in on this. I too feel that the debt is excessive for a city our size. I don't know that, I think we've cleared 10,000, but I think the debt is excessive. I said that during, the campaign when we were running, and everyone kept saying it's not. It is excessive debt, in my opinion. And I don't know, Mr. Pessimir, a city our size, is this pretty standard to have this much debt?
So every city is different. We've answered this question before, and we'll certainly be glad to answer it again. I think the real litmus test, when you're talking about debt is, how Moody's rates your debt. And if you don't know who Moody's is, they're the financial service that comes in and looks at every organization and assigns each city a rating based on a very detailed look at all of your debt, all of your outstanding obligations, what revenues you have, and more importantly, where those revenues are coming from, and that you have a really solid plan for repayment in many, many different areas. And they recently, upgraded our rating, because they recognize the plans that we have in place and the way that we do things are really solid. And we're up there among the top cities of our size. Is an exceptional debt rating. It is a large number, and I can understand why people are concerned about it, and they should ask questions. And we need to be really cautious and careful about what we do, not only now but in the future. But everything that we hear from the professionals out there, and even when we go out for refinancing our bonds, is very, very comfortable. They're very comfortable with the debt that we have. They see it that it's high, and they remark on that as well. But they also feel that we are well within our ability to repay all that back based on the way that we've done things. And so, they're big numbers. It's hard for me to quantify what other cities are and everything else, but certainly the people who know the best believe that we're in a good position.
Okay, and I did hear you say that basically the debt is here and we have a plan to repay it, so we're going to do that. But I just don't want to discount that this is where we're at, and it has been many, many years of choices and decisions that we've made to get to this point. So now, I do understand repayment schedules. I do understand all of that. But I'm just saying that we can't sugarcoat it. It is a big deal. And we're supposed to be good stewards and for our city, spending the money wisely and stuff. And there's a lot of things I didn't agree with on the budget as well. But that's my 2 cents.
Councilor Morton, would you get that?
Yes, I don't want us to discount the fact that we have high debt and not look around the community and see what this city has been able to do. And yes, some of it has been from taking on debt, but it's been taking on very well thought out debt that has not only a repayment plan, but will bring economic benefit to our community for years and years to come. And we just can't forget that it's something that's not isolated. It has a positive side to it too. And that is all the good that's been going on in the community and all the positive changes that have happened in the last few years.
Councilor Core, do we have any other hands raised?
No.
I would just like to say one more thing to respond to Councilor Morton, I'm sorry, that yes, we do have a great city. Yes, we have really wonderful things. Yes, I'm happy for that, but we need to start investing in things that will actually have a return of money for our city instead of things that just make it look pretty.
Thank you, Councilor Roden. Councilor Core, do you have any other hands raised?
Nope.
Okay, at this time, I would like to open for hearings. Item 10 on your agenda, state revenue sharing.
So this is opened up to public hearing. So we'll ask City Recorder if there's anybody that wants to speak.
There is nobody here who wishes to speak, and I did not receive any comments.
Okay. So in your budget book, moving on to the action items in your budget book, or if Jason, if you could please share your screen with the action items. I believe it's 1.11.
And Counselor, excuse me, Chair Scholl, there's also to be technically a hearing on the proposed city budget, if there's any comments on that. And I just wanted to make sure that that was technically opened. And I could let you
Okay.
know that there were no comments received on that as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Dory, I did not receive a copy of the budget. If someone can send it to me, I'm happy to share it.
I'll send that to you, Jason.
Thank you. We're almost done, folks.
Page 1.11.
Okay, Jason, you should, it's on the way.
Nancy Lawson has her hand up.
Yeah, is this the time where we move to approve the city budget? Which is
correct.
1.1, page 1.11. Once the
Correct.
budget committee has agreed, then these three motions need to be made, correct? Dory?
Yes, correct, Nancy.
Okay.
That is correct. We're just waiting for that page to get to Jason so he can put it up on the screen, because I don't believe everybody actually has a hard copy.
Okay. Well, when it comes up on the screen, I'll be happy to make the first motion. Okay. I move to approve the City of Independence budget for fiscal year 2021-2022.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
I oppose.
Do I hear another motion coming?
I would move to approve the levying of the city's full tax rate of 4.5897 per 1,000 assessed value.
I second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.
I move to. Oh, thank you. Go ahead, Tom.
I move to approve the city imposed taxes in the amount of $415,452 for the general obligation bonds.
Second.
Discussion?
I actually do have a question. I don't understand what this statement means. So where are those taxes coming from?
Those are from a special election for the issuance of general obligation bonds. So they're a separate assessment of taxes on your property tax bill. And so the vote for those gave a cap on dollars per thousand, which was $1.35 per thousand when that was passed. For each year subsequent for that, we've actually levied under that that maximum amount that we could impose.
So then is that remaining number, the 415,452, is that to be kind of divvied up over all of the property owners based on their assessed value?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Was that the 2013 bond, Gloria?
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you. And just for those viewing, that was approved by the voters in Independence overwhelmingly at that time.
Okay, so at this time, if there's no further discussion on item 3, I would like to ask for all in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll oppose.
Who is that?
That was Council Roden.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, motion carries. At this time, we would like to adjourn the budget committee portion and move on to the Urban Renewal Agency. So if you will go to your next agenda for Urban Renewal Agency and turn to page 1.12, you'll be looking at that in a few moments.
And Jason has that up on the screen too, Dory.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, Karen, did you get, I don't have my clock in front of me. Oh, 8:32 for adjourn on the City Council Budget Committee?
Yeah.
And then I would like to open and call to order at 8:33 p.m. the Urban Renewal Agency. If we could go on to roll call.
Okay. Mayor McCardle,
Yes.
Aaron Seiler,
Here.
Councillor Core.
Here.
Jessica Porter,
Here.
Councillor Morton,
Here.
Bill Boivert,
Here.
Boisvert, I'm sorry. Councillor Job,
Here.
Dory Scholl,
Here.
Councillor Roden,
I'm present.
Nancy Lodge,
Nancy, you're muted.
So sorry. Here.
Councillor Takis,
Here.
Nathan Christensen,
Here.
and Councillor Martin Willis.
Here.
Is Miranda still absent?
And Miranda is still absent, yes.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So let's go down to item 3, review of agenda. And I will look to Tom for that, please.
Well, yeah, so this probably be really quick. What's not on here is kind of a presentation of the urban renewal budget. And so I will probably do that very quick. I think there was really only one question that was related to the urban renewal. So I will cover that during the presentation. And after that, we will then go to turning it back over to the budget committee to kind of talk about what they've heard and then move on to the public hearing and then the action items, which are before you on your screen. But before we look at that, Jason, can you go to the budget and look at page 3.53? So there's only two pages in your budget document that actually have information about the urban renewal. So this is a kind of a two-fund budget, and so it's really fairly straightforward for this year. So I'll just wait for Jason to pull that up, and then I'll kind of go through that fairly quickly, and then Gloria can add anything.
I'm sorry, Tom, what section did you need again?
It's a 3.53, 3.53. All right, so this is the Urban Renewal Projects Fund. As you can see in the past, we've done some very large projects in the Urban Renewal District, but that really has come to a close. And so if you take a look at the uses, Jason, if you can highlight that $500, the only uses that we have planned to expend out of the urban renewal this year is literally $500. We don't really plan on doing any projects. We just have that in there miscellaneous for typically we have some reports that we need to do at the end of the year and some other items that we just need to cover. So there's no personal services. There's no capital expenses this year. We really wound down the expenditure side of the urban renewal agency. If you take a look at the sources, you'll see that property taxes is the bulk of everything coming in either in the current year or the prior year. We are earning a little bit of interest, but those are essentially to cover the interfund loan payments that you see down there at the bottom of $275,600. Jason, can you see that and highlight that? One of the things that we realized when we were going through the budget the first time is that since we don't have control, we're kind of talking about numbers. But yeah, there's that number there. So the Urban Renewal Project Fund is really pretty much wrapped up. And we're really in a process for the Urban Renewal Agency of just paying back the debt. Jason, if you can go back up to 3.52, if you take a look at the property taxes current line, you can see the trend there, and that's exactly what you're supposed to be seeing. In 1890, it was $400,000, and it's increased each year, and our estimate is about $556,000. The property taxes coming into the Urban Renewal Agency lag because the assessed value is done in January, and you don't actually see the property taxes coming in until the following year. So we've had some big projects come in. The hotel is, fully in that amount, but the apartments are not. They were still under construction, so there would be a certain value that the county assigned to it, but it wouldn't be a very high value because they were unfinished in January. So those will come on for next fiscal year along with Osprey Point. So, the whole plan behind the urban renewal was to build things and then have that property tax come in and support the debt that's been taken out. And as you can see, we're in a really good spot to do that. That is what the whole plan behind the Urban Renewal Agency was. That's why some of these projects are done. And we're seeing that return in property taxes. Really, this is just the debt service fund. So you can see the debt going out. If you take a look down there at the bottom, you'll see a number for the IFA loan, the $260,000. That's the IFA loan that we were talking about earlier. We didn't have a debt schedule for that, but we certainly know that we have a payment to make on that of $260,000 this year. And so that is included. And really, unless Gloria has anything to add, that is urban renewal. Urban renewal is really wrapped up from an expenditure perspective. We're just in that collecting money and paying things back now.
Right. Yeah, I don't have anything to add except that on the projects fund, as you had pointed out, they will continue to make payments on the interfund loans that they had received. And that pretty much sums it up.
you. So I'm sorry. We didn't have any questions submitted on this one.
It was pretty much folded into the overall questions. So most of the questions that would relate to urban renewal was the debt.
Does our committee have any discussion on this?
Nobody's got their hand. I think Nancy's got her hand up, but are you, Nancy, do you have your hand up because you want to make a motion, or you just forgot to take your hand down?
I'm sorry, I forgot to lower my hand. I'm sorry.
You're
tired.
tired.
I guess so. No, I was so engrossed in looking at the urban renewal projects that we're not going to be doing. So anyway, I did not have a question. Thank you.
Dory, Councilor Martin Willis has a question or a comment.
I was actually going to offer a motion, if I may.
Yeah, before you do, Counselor, we do need to open a public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, yes, thank you. So moving down to the first item 7, hearing proposed on the URD budget fiscal year 21-22, open for public.
And again, there are no visitors in the lobby wishing to comment on the budget, and no comments were received prior to the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Moving on to the action items. Okay, Kathy. This is 1.12 in your book. Jason, if you have that up for anybody that needs it.
Well, and I have it open in my book. So I move to approve the Independence Urban Renewal District budget for fiscal year 2021-2022.
Second.
Sorry, who seconded?
I seconded. Sorry, Aaron.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Second item.
I'd be happy to make the motion. I move to approve that the district levy the maximum incremental tax revenue as provided under state law.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Real quick, before we adjourn, I want to thank everybody for their time and their efforts. And the department heads, I thought you all did, if you're still around in internet land there, I thought you all did a very good job on your budget narratives. It was really nice to see those this year set up that way. With that, thank you,
Lori, may
everybody.
I?
Yes.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody on behalf of all the citizens of Independence, all the residents that live here. Thank you for taking the hours to read through 208 pages. Thank you for looking hard and asking questions, and for your service. This is the kind of work that helps make our community really a wonderful place to live. And I'm looking forward to going forward. We're past the hardest parts. And we'll be able to actually see each other and visit in person as the summer opens up. So I look forward to seeing all of you. Thank you, all of you, for doing this. It does make a difference. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With that, I'm sorry, I always have to convert my 24-hour clock in my brain. 8:45 p.m. The Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee meeting is adjourned.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much.
Dinner.